Welcome back. Congress is about to hit its annual limit of one spending bill it passes via reconciliation. That annual limit could have an interesting implication for this year's defense spending legislation. Todd Harrison is director of the Aerospace Security Project, the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Todd, thanks for coming on the program. You tweeted about this recently. What caught your eye?
Yeah, so what's interesting about it is because Congress didn't pass a budget resolution for fiscal year 21, even though they went ahead and actually passed the appropriations bills for FY21, what they're doing with the stimulus legislation to go through reconciliation is they're actually using FY21 for reconciliation. So what's important about that is it means that they could come back later and pass an FY22 budget resolution and have an FY22 reconciliation package as well. So the fact that they're using reconciliation now in the stimulus, which does not include defense, does not preclude the fact that they could come back later this year and use reconciliation again, and this time including defense.
You are wonderful on the space issues to which you have moved over the last several years, but I was so excited to see this tweet because it takes us back to the conversations you and I had 10 years ago or longer about the defense budget. And I wonder, what is the implication for that on the way that the spending bills, the way the appropriations bills could potentially be constructed, Todd? Is there an implication there, or does it not matter that much?
There's a potential implication, right? So we'll have to wait till later in the year to see how the politics of this actually, follow through. But what we're looking at is the possibility that, once they get this stimulus through and there's no money for defense in it, they can come back, and when they're ready to pass the regular FY22 appropriations bills, if they're not seeing cooperation from Republicans in the Senate, they can bypass them by using reconciliation again. And so what that means is for defense, they could pass a defense appropriations bill without any Republican support, not in the House, not in the Senate, and then obviously, they've got a Democratic-controlled White House now. So, whatever Republican priorities that there are for defense in FY22, they won't necessarily be taken into account if they end up using reconciliation to pass it.
That makes the Democrats on HAC-D and SAC-D maybe the most powerful people in the defense community in Washington, doesn't it?
I think it does, yes, absolutely. Especially, on the Senate side, when they've now got this threat of reconciliation that they can still use for the FY22 budget.
What will you watch for the markers between here and there? How will we try to predict or decide whether that becomes a greater or lesser possibility? Because if it becomes a greater possibility, that could seriously change what those bills wind up looking like and where that money winds up going, couldn't it?
It could, yeah. And so actually what I would be looking for is kind of the biggest indicator of whether or not they're going to go the reconciliation route is not what happens on defense, because there tends to be more bipartisan agreement on defense issues, even in this highly partisan time. I would be looking for how much agreement can they find in the Senate, in particular, between Republicans and Democrats on non-defense issues, non-defense spending issues. If there are wide disagreements about non-defense spending for FY22, then I think that raises the odds substantially that Democrats end up using the reconciliation option.
In the context of all of that, Todd, with all of those possibilities there, what different, and I mean this genuinely and not rhetorically, what difference does the Biden administration's budget request do probably sometime next month, maybe a little bit late? What does that really mean? How much does it matter?
Yeah, no, I think it will matter a lot because Democrats in the House and the Senate, they're going to take their cues from the Biden administration's budget request. He is the leader of the party now. And so they're going to take their cues from that. I think, it's up to Republicans to figure out what's their strategy for how to respond to that. They're clearly not going to agree with everything that's in that budget request, especially on the non-defense side. And so they've got to, ask themselves how much leverage do they really have, when ultimately Democrats can pass this without them.
I appreciate this conversation in particular because we focus on this program a lot on the authorization piece of this and not as much on the appropriations piece as you and I are today. But the authorization piece is also important. Matching those two could potentially be different as a result of this narrative, as a result of this dialogue, couldn't it, Todd?
Yeah, it absolutely could. And we've seen this happen in the past, that sometimes the track that the authorization bills are on, the NDAA, can end up on a very different track than the appropriations end up on. But at the end of the day, it's always important to remember that the authorization bill is a policy bill. It sets policy. It can put constraints on spending or when money can be used, but it cannot appropriate money. Only an appropriations bill can actually provide money. So the defense budget is ultimately set by the appropriations bills. And so, using reconciliation, they can short circuit that, filibuster process in the Senate and push something through. The other thing I would point out is, this hasn't been an issue for the past 10 years because we had the Budget Control Act budget caps, right? And the budget caps are ultimately what was, setting the level of defense and non-defense spending. You could not change the budget caps using reconciliation. The Senate rules said that. So, this is the first time for FY22 that you actually could set the defense budget using reconciliation, because you don't have to worry about these caps anymore because the caps ended in FY21.
Todd Harrison, thanks very much as always. Appreciate it.
All right. Glad to be back.